Ladies and gentlemen, I have another incredible interview. This is one that I've been anticipating for a very long time. This young lady is incredibly busy. She's out fighting for America and doing all the wonderful things. So that's why it's been difficult to try to get this interview, but she's here. This is I would consider her to be a longtime friend, one of the most trusted people in Congress by far. And this person is Paulina Luna, Republican representative from Florida's 13th Congressional District. Anna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So happy to be here, Brandon. And for those that don't know, I've known Brandon since our days at Turning Point.
Yeah, we go way back. So, I want to get into some stuff with you because you're one of the few trusted people, in my opinion, in Congress. Somebody who we know is authentic, somebody we know is not bought and paid for, pushing agendas, all this old crazy stuff that we see from people on the right and the left. So this is why I wanted to interview you and ask you these real pointed, authentic questions. And I want to start with the foreign influence. And then I want to go with the UAPs, and then I want to talk about Epstein. Those are the 3 points that I want to hit. But when it comes to influence, why should, Americans care or be concerned about foreign influence on social media and with social media personalities?
Well, first of all, you saw my line of questioning the other day with Secretary Rubio. He came into foreign affairs. That's my purview of jurisdiction for one of the committees that I'm on. So for those that might not know, our job in Congress is not just voting and writing legislation or engaging in the election process. It is the legislation process, but it's also, for example, if you oversee budget, appropriations. In my purview of authority, I have foreign affairs, which handles everything under the purview of the State Department. So i.e. peace deals, negotiations, foreign aid, all of that. And then also to the House Oversight, which conducts the congressional investigations, usually largely focusing on public corruption, et cetera. So specifically on the foreign influence aspect, there is no question, and I think regardless of party affiliation, anyone will tell you that because of the fact that we have this very unique thing called the First Amendment here, that there are foreign countries that are engaging in using that First Amendment to launch massive psyops and propaganda campaigns against the American people. Now, there's a big difference if you just fundamentally disagree on policy. You can even look back into really the difference between Democrats and Republicans going back to the 60s. It wasn't as divided and vitriol as it is today. And what I will say is largely what's contributed to that is two things. One is social media and the lack of actual face-to-face interaction and kind of these keyboard warriors on the internet, which I'm sure, you as well as any other person who really does have a profile or following will understand what we're talking about. And then also to the aspect of we have seen there's been evidence of bot farms. I've actually posted a lot of this, bot farms being run out of specifically China that might target specific policies or people. So like the next time you're arguing on the internet, just ensure that you're not arguing with a bot farm specifically. It does seem that the bot farms are more active on places like X that tries to drive up the engagement for certain postings. And what we're finding is that let's say that you have a position like in myself that doesn't want to continue the war in Ukraine, right? So like I've been advocating for peace, opening up the diplomatic talks, et cetera. Well, you might have, a pro war perspective on both sides, whether it's here in Washington with special interests funding the war or making money off of it, or different governments that would benefit from the war continuing. And so what they'll do is they'll take postings, they'll hit them with bot accounts in an effort to try to convince the American people that you need to continue it and here's why, thus driving up the engagement and then making it a topic of discussion when in actuality, in organic form, it's not organic. And you saw my line of questioning with Secretary Rubio yesterday, specifically on one organization known as Code Pink. So Neville Roysingham, as Secretary Rubio had stated, is an American businessman, but he has and lives in China specifically and has made a lot of money working with the Chinese government and is a devout communist, a devout Maoist, and does not like what we stand for here in the United States as a constitutional republic. So what he's doing is he's funneling a ton of money into various organizations to the tune of over 100 million in an effort to promote an ideology that is responsible for these protests that are not organic, organizations like the Party of Socialism and Liberation. He also has funded and has been connected loosely to organizations that were investigated for the Charlie Kirk assassination or that had ties to the shooter. And so when I say that there is an actual intelligence operation to this, I mean this, but it's not just China. It's our other adversaries. Sometimes it's our allies, because they understand how important the United States is in regards to getting assistance, also to the position that we stand on the world stage, and understanding that politicians specifically are responsible for that legislation. So they try to influence policy. So I saw this happening. And really up until, when Marco Rubio was in the House Senate Intelligence Committee, he had actually sent a letter to Merrick Garland asking him to open up, or to the Attorney General asking him to open up a case on a FARA violation, because Navarro Singham is not, to my knowledge, a registered agent of FARA. That is the Foreign Registration Act that would require people, if they are lobbying on behalf of a foreign government, to register as such, as a disclosure to the American people, the Foreign Agent Registration Act. And there's silence. There's crickets from the Biden administration, because the Biden administration was very pro-China. We know that from the Hunter Biden laptop stories. But all that to say that this is just one small example. Then we have other examples of other countries paying large scale influencers for postings. And that is stuff that I have seen privately. We are in touch right now working with various intelligence agencies to see who is who, but then also is this money actually being tied to more nefarious causes in the event sometimes going into Cuba? Is this money also tied to known terrorist networks? I mean, this is a very big deal. And so the fact is that it is our goal and responsibility as members of Congress, and you're actually seeing, because this is so prevalent and members of Congress know it, you're actually seeing a lot of members on both sides, or at least a lot of personalities on both sides saying, well, we know for a fact that there's, this problem happening, and that people are getting paid, and it does need to be addressed. So I feel like the FARA thing is something that's actually more bipartisan than not. But what we also find is that it makes you a target. And so, for example, Singham is funding this organization known as Code Pink. Code Pink specifically says that they are anti-war. One of the co-founders has been subpoenaed by the Department of Justice for going down to Cuba. That's an ongoing federal investigation. And yesterday I actually was able, or the other day I was actually able to question Secretary of State Rubio on the ties of Code Pink to the CCP, to Navarro Singham. And then obviously you saw them accosting me as I was leaving. There's a lot of footage as I was leaving the committee that's not been publicly released. But obviously when I go outside, I don't care if you don't like my position. I don't care if you don't like the president's position, but you have no right to touch me, and you have no right to smack my shoulder or my hand or whatever. Don't even touch my body.
Right.
In this instance, this person was walking up next to me. I was not giving her the responses that she wanted. I was trying to get away from her. And what does she do? She literally smacks me with the side of her hand, and that's not acceptable. And so for me, I'm not going to, say that that's okay when you have literally members of Congress that are constantly receiving death threats. We're having our families threatened. You have members of Congress that actively have federal investigations for those threats being made. And I think right now we have a political climate where if you have, that type of behavior that's acceptable, then it's only going to increase the likelihood of something happen that could result in, sometimes death. And so that's not the type of environment we're in. But ultimately, I do have legislation that I'm introducing, and I've been reaching out to other members, both Democrat and Republican, to try to get them to co-sponsor this legislation that will require any country, regardless of origin, I don't care if you're a friend or a foe, to require those influencers online to disclose if they are getting paid by them. And I think that that's a very, very fair perspective. You could be, for example, we'll take the Israel or the Palestine issue. If you are organically, in agreement with that position, that's one thing. But if you are knowingly posting on behalf of a foreign government to sway American opinion on that, you should be required to disclose it. And so that's where I stand on that. I don't make any apologies for that position. But I will tell you that, from what we've seen from our perspective, it's a problem. And it's also a problem that so many people are silent on it.
I want to tell you guys about the 250 merch. Make sure you go to tatumstore.com, tatumstore.com. I got a couple shirts I want to show you. Happy birthday to the United States of America, 250th birthday. This is our best seller right here, the one I got, which is pretty cool. 250, got the eagle on there, got the stamp. You cannot get this with this quality anywhere else. I'm just letting you know. Everybody that shop on our store, you know what it is. We got 30,000 reviews, 5-star reviews, and almost 200,000 customers. So It's a legitimate store. They got legitimate merch. Get you some of the merch today. TatumStore.com. I have a question for you, and I don't know if you could disclose some of these things, but like in my mind, I see people who do things very nefariously, or it appears that they're doing things nefariously, operating on behalf of a foreign government. Then there's people people are claiming that are operating on behalf of a foreign government, like myself. People say, Brandon, you're getting paid $7,000 from Israel. When in reality, I'm probably losing $7,000 every time I talk about Israel. But is that a part of this effort and investigation as well? Is to say there are influences out here, and there's people, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but there's people that I have questions about, Tucker Carlson and some other people that I have questions about. But if it's investigated, it would be revealed that he either has something to do with or nothing to do with anything with a foreign government. Same with me. So is there an active investigation, and are there people who are potentially being looked at that are major social media talking heads?
I will tell you that from what I'm hearing and from what
Oh,
you're seeing on various groups, can you hear me right now, Brandon?
yep.
Okay. What I'm seeing right now is that from the White House, they are looking into all of this. You've seen statements come out. I mean, look at what just happened recently with them finding out. And also, too, remember, Congress did send a letter via House Oversight. I was on that letter with Chairman Comer as well as other members in the past that have engaged, the executive branch on this specific topic. But there's a lot. There's a lot that's being funded specifically from China, and Singham would be probably number one. But then we also see the different influencers on the left that are taking, or associated with organizations and groups. I would have to say that, are we specifically asking for names? I mean, I'm asking directly, is there anyone that is nefariously tied to these organizations that is
Yeah.
actively working to undermine the direction of the United States government? I think, obviously you have freedom of speech. American citizens are protected, and rightfully so. However, if you are going to work and you are getting money from a foreign government to do something, you have to disclose it. But unfortunately, our laws for influencers, specifically with campaigns, specifically with election law, have not been updated. So you have the
Yeah.
Foreign Agent Registration Act that's already on the books. It just has to be enforced. But I will also say this too. When you have a country like China that's playing and trying to divide the United States on both sides and both issues. Like, I will say first and foremost, would I rather vacation in Israel or Iran? I'm going to say Israel, but also too, can I be critical and open and honest when I disagree with the decisions of Israel and Bibi Netanyahu? Absolutely. But I'm also not going to sit here and say, hey, look, right now, everything that's going wrong in this country is a result of Israel. I don't agree with that sentiment. And I
Right.
think that when you have people that, solely rely on those responses instead of actually looking at the substantive argument, well, look, we're trying to provide transparency. Everyone and their grandmother should be supporting this. I just saw recently that there was a piece of legislation that's being introduced to ensure and codify that within the next 10 years there will be a wind down of support for aid to Israel. Look, I sit on foreign affairs, and the United States gives tons and tons of aid to other countries. We also have a weapon and intel exchange and agreement with Israel. But I also understand the perspective of people saying, look, we have issues at home. We need to address these issues and focus on these issues. I understand all of that. I also agree with that sentiment. But what I will say is that this conversation specifically, I feel, has been, in a sense, manipulated by organizations like the CCP. You're seeing that on all sides. And unfortunately, if you have these conversations, if you ask questions, then they try to go in with their bots and then automatically call you a shill, whatever it might be. And so, look, ultimately, I think right now on both sides, if we can also further this discussion, how would I fix this problem to really restore faith and trust with the American people? And I think that also gets into the aspect of campaign finance reform. You have, members of Congress that are really taking in a lot of money from PAC money, and they almost make it impossible for people, if you are funded by grassroots and not associated with Washington, D.C., to get into office. I can talk
Yeah.
about my first race. I was not the candidate that was supported by the Republican Party. And instead, they
Really?
got behind a pharmaceutical lobbyist. Yeah. And so I had to rely on my social media to raise the grassroots dollar in an effort to compete. And I was also outspent, in my first election that I did win in 2022. I think it was 1-3 in the primary and then 12-1 in the general election.
Oh.
And I was largely relying on these grassroots donations. So it's like, you have to understand that until there's election law reform, people are going to have to, in a sense, take certain PAC money, not all of it. But if
Yeah.
I had a magic wand, I could go
And
on for days about this because there's a lot there.
yeah. No, I know we have a limited time, but we have to get this conversation
The banning
going. And
insider trading. Yeah,
yeah,
but
yeah,
there's
yeah.
more.
So that's another thing, insider trading. I want to ask you this question just very bluntly, because I know that we're friends
Yeah.
and we are transparent and open with each other. How much effect does AIPAC actually have? Because I don't want to be biased when I talk about this. I don't think AIPAC has a significant impact, but I'm not in Congress and I'm not seeing this stuff every day. So when we talk about foreign influence, and obviously, it appears, based on what the reality is when it comes to AIPAC, AIPAC is not foreign. It's Americans who are lobbying for interests of Israel. But is AIPAC, in your opinion, based on your experience and what you see from your colleagues, is AIPAC a problem? I mean, just in your opinion, I don't know if you can speak on it, but is AIPAC a problem to you?
Yeah, so what I will say is that the same people that say that everything goes back to AIPAC, which I think as a whole, I've met with AIPAC once, and they will give, I think, $11,000, no different than any other organization, through the duration of a campaign, which there's plenty of organizations that do that. But I think specifically on this issue, it's really coming down to fundamentally, do you support the state of Israel, or do you support a two-state solution, or do you support just Palestine only? And so really this has become, I think, one of those lightning rod issues where that's really what the argument is about. But I think to target one specific organization, because look, if I swear off taking, any AIPAC money, which by the way, separately, again, going back to my campaign finance, I would prefer that just there's no special interest money, period, in politics.
I agree.
That's a completely separate topic. And I do think the special interest is tied to people insider trading and then personally benefiting on what these organizations are getting. Not saying that AIPAC is doing that, but like in the defense industry, for example, people owning stock portfolios, not wanting to advocate for peace. And then you see that they are getting PAC checks from like different defense contractors, then they're becoming rich off of the weapon sales. Totally separate conversation. But for this specifically, then if someone like myself were to not take any more AIPAC money, but then I say, well, I do support either a two-state solution, I support President Trump's peace talks, then all of a sudden, is it really about the issue of AIPAC, or is it about that you just don't want Israel to exist in the current form, and you disagree with that funnily? So then they choose to take this organization and make it the face of all that is evil. And admittedly, I will say, again, so I'm on foreign affairs. I also sit on oversight. I'd say many members of Congress, if you're looking at special interest money that they're taking, if I could get rid of all of it, tomorrow and say no PAC money, I would. But to say and target one specific organization, and then these are the same people that are saying President Trump is fundamentally controlled by Bibi Netanyahu in Israel, and yet the video call comes out and they're like, oh, that's staged, that's fake, that's not real. It's like at a certain point, when people have made up their mind on this issue, then that's it. But what I will say is that I would much rather have President Trump in the position and the driver's seat specifically on these negotiations than any other president right now, because he has seemed to be the first person that if he really wanted to kick off World War III tomorrow, he would have sent troops into Ukraine to fully back Ukraine, and he didn't. He instead pursued peace through his diplomatic dialogue with Russia. They're actively engaging in those talks, and people forget that President Trump isn't just talking with Israel. He's talking with the other Gulf states. He's talking to Qatar. He's talking to Syria. I mean, how many times do people, give their subject matter expert opinion on these issues? But do I ever hear these people saying that we need to advocate for peace? People forget that as part of that agreement and the ceasefire in Israel with, what was happening in Gaza, that President Trump said, we will give aid to what's happening with the Palestinians. People forget that. They don't want to talk about it. And so all I'm here to say is that I'm not going to demonize any certain group. The fact is that President Trump was endorsed not just by Jewish Americans, but by Muslim Americans. So Joe Biden managed to unite the country on that front. But to say again that AIPAC is controlling, I just think that that's a disingenuous argument, because I will say this: if AIPAC was controlling everything, when I went and voted against, there was a piece of legislation that would make it was a slippery slope for a hate speech argument,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I voted against this legislation because if you do engage in certain sayings, it could be deemed as such. I didn't see them, banging down my door and calling me this, but it's you have to take a position. You have to
Yeah.
be able to explain it. I will tell you that I do feel like this issue specifically has been something that massive operations from other foreign governments have been launching. But again, it's not just this issue alone. We have seen that specifically in President Trump's efforts to get elected. There was other countries that knew that he would be tough on them. We saw some reporting coming out about the Chinese prior to the 2024 election. And if I had to choose one of the biggest problems that we're having right now in regards to, I think, a lot of the upsetting conversations that we're seeing taking place or why people are concerned, I would say it's largely Chinese funded. Now, it doesn't mean to say that America shouldn't clean up its election process. We should.
Right.
We should take out all of the special interest money. We should cap how much is being able to be spent in these elections, because at a certain point, if you're not independently wealthy and you want to run for office, that's great. But it
Yeah.
makes it almost impossible to get elected. And then that's when you really see the corporate interests working against the American people.
Right.
And so I'll continue to kind of have these conversations and discussions. But again, I think that, really where Charlie was on all of this is that you can't run away from the argument. You can't run away from the discussion. You should be able to have it. But the minute people try to then take away from the actual substantive issues and actually be able to have those discussions providing a different dynamic, and they just jump right into insults or saying that you're a
Right.
shill and controlled, I mean,
Yeah.
they've lost the argument.
Right. 1,000%. Representative Luna, I got
What do you
one more
think?
thing.
I mean, what do you think? I have to ask you though, real quick. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, 1,000%. I think that when I did the research on the whole AIPAC thing, I find it disingenuous that people only focus on that group. If you don't like Americans lobbying for Israel or foreign governments, then you have to feel that way about every single one of these organizations, because there's more than just AIPAC. They just so happen to have probably more money. But then also when it comes to foreign influence, some people categorize AIPAC as a foreign influence, which I don't believe that it is. It's not FAR registered. It doesn't have to be FAR registered. But there are other countries that are sending billions of dollars into our education system. Like you say, China, you have Qatar, you have some of these other Arab countries that are giving millions of dollars and have an incredible amount of influence in the United States of America. And the same people that cry about AIPAC are not also concerned about, those other entities. I have been concerned, like you have mentioned, and I'm glad that you said it, about the bots, because it's very interesting how you can see tides turning. At one point, you post something about Israel, if you were pro-Israel, you just get bombarded in the comment section with all kind of crazy stuff. And I interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu, and what he had mentioned in the interview, which people never watch because they only want him to be a devil, but what he had mentioned was there were bots that were acting like American citizens and actually acting as if they had a real grievance against you. Like he was saying that there were bots that were popping up, and it was a bot that says, "Hey, I'm from Texas, and I can't believe you turned." Like they were sophisticated bots where it's not just
Yeah, so
saying,
what the you
yeah,
can
go ahead.
always I was gonna say you can always identify them, and it's not even just on this issue. But what we're seeing is that it happens too with like targeted persons, elections, etc. And it's mainly, I think, if you're looking at all the platforms, like yeah, you might get it here and there on Instagram, but it seems to be more of an issue, I think, on X. But if you look at sometimes the IPs of these places, like you can see where their accounts formed, or you can always see it's a bot because they're always formed. It's like a certain amount of followers. I think it's like
Yeah,
maximum 1,000, no photo, no other genuine engagement, and then they can activate at certain times. But to be clear, it's not just the Israel issue. That's
yeah,
just an example. It is
yeah,
other issues as well affecting us. Also, too, we've seen it on certain things, like if there's big votes coming up. They used to send out text messages in our district. Now, certain people, will be targeted based on if there's engagement. I've actually know for a fact there is a former individual that was a part of the last administration that's running bot farms now. And so it happens, I think, on both sides. But again, to be clear, the stuff that we're working on, if you want to lobby on behalf of a foreign government, okay, but you have to disclose it.
Yeah.
And the fact is that the tides and really the way that politics have occurred has changed. And so it's now with influencers, it's now with people that get paid. I'm not saying that I know for a fact that some of these bigger names are doing that. I'm just saying in general, to be ideologically consistent, you can't have one for one country and not the other.
Yeah.
But I will also say that what's happening right now is for the younger generation, specifically on what's been happening with the bot targeting. I mean, you can have one issue, and if people are convinced enough of a certain perspective, they then organically will start to believe it.
Yeah.
We saw that during COVID, this is important, on TikTok, before TikTok was forced to have an American kind of basically buffering the data and information sales. TikTok was knowingly showing pro-trans, pro-radical left content to children.
Mm-hmm.
And if that platform were to be shown in China, it was completely polar opposite content, encouraging people to go into engineering, astronauts, mathematics, whatever. So they were intentionally trying to target, radicalize, and dumb down
Wow.
our own children in this country. And I think wherever you're at politically, you should not be in the position where you are shilling for our adversary.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I'm glad that you guys are working on that because it's important to be transparent because, you have a people that have a lot of influence. Some people have FU influence. You know how people got FU money? There's some people got FU influence. That means that people will believe anything that they say. They'll say anything. They can lie, and a lot of people will be influenced and believe them. I do want there to be like a little, because when people use AI, you're supposed to disclose that this video is, partially created
Yeah,
with
it'll say
AI.
sometimes AI, it's marked on the platforms, yeah,
Right, and
but not all of them.
we
Yeah,
need to have that same thing if it's sponsored content by any lobby group. Like if just say if I
I
came
agree.
out and I was like, hey,
Pharmaceuticals wouldn't like that.
right. If I said, hey, this right here is a good product, and it's like, no, you need to disclose that you got paid for that. Or if you're lobbying on behalf of another country, like if you are saying things that are favorable to Qatar, if you believe them genuinely, we live in America, we say what we want. But if somehow you have been paid or there's a coordinated effort for you to say that, you should disclose that. Even people who run for office, like politicians who are getting, money from certain things and it's crafting what they believe in and don't believe in. There should be something on social media that says this is paid for by or sponsored by or endorsed by. Like there's got to be. I would like for there to be. I
All,
don't say there have to
yeah,
be,
no,
but I would like for there to be disclosures.
I think that that's a really, really great perspective and honestly a great idea. And we would like to actually see this legislation go to floor, but I just don't know that Congress will ever act on that because of the fact that there's so much money being made
Yeah.
in this space. And I think that people ultimately, are pressured into not doing the right thing, especially in this place. And so if
Yeah.
there's a magic wand that I could have to fix this, I would say that banning the insider trading,
Yes.
and then also to capping the amount that can be spent in elections because it shouldn't
Yes.
be hundreds of millions of dollars to
I
run
know.
or in tens of millions depending. It's crazy,
It
and
it, it
that's
cre-
not what really our founding fathers
Yes,
wanted for
it
us.
creates fraud. Like if you have to be honest, I think there should be a reasonable cap, and you have to be able to win on your merit. How can you articulate yourself? What are you saying about the people? How genuine are you? You know what I'm saying? How hard are you willing to work? Because you
Yeah.
can have a person who is lukewarm, mediocre. It happened right here in Arizona. Our Democrat governor didn't even run. She just paid hundreds or millions of dollars, not hundreds of millions because it wasn't that much, but she paid
Yeah,
millions of
they just
dollars
pay for the name ID.
on
Yeah, and
ads.
their thing is
And
that if they can raise, yeah, they brand themselves, they can raise the money and then that's it. And they basically will essentially buy the policies and positions trust, and that's how
right,
they get elected. They
right.
call it buying a seat. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're a billionaire and you're like,
Hmm.
I want this passed, you got a small race where people are raising hundreds of thousands. You're a billionaire.
Hmm.
You can load money in on supporting of one candidate. And what do you think the candidate is going to do? They're going to feel some obligation to say, hey,
Yeah,
man, this
they'll
guy has
respond.
literally bankrolled me. I probably should listen to him. We need to cut that out of politics. It's
I
not
will
right.
say, I will say too, just kind of on this before we move on to the other stuff, because I know we have a short window of time, is that I don't fully blame, and I actually think that it is right for the American people to feel distrusting, especially given the historical way that our government has lied to the American people.
Yes.
And that's where this fundamentally comes from, is that thread of distrust. And I think it really goes all the way back to what happened with Kennedy. And part of what I think is important is this aspect of transparency. We have to disclose as elected members of Congress who we're getting money from. But now the thing is that if other people are going to have media platforms, which is really what social media has become, then they should also be required to disclose it,
Yeah.
because they do influence people, and people at least should have the awareness of that. I will finalize by saying this, and this is also equally important. Right now, just as President Trump was able to successfully engage in peace talks with what was happening in Gaza and what was happening with Israel, and like, we don't want people to die, period. I don't care what
Right.
side they're on, we don't want people to die. He is equally engaged in very important diplomatic talks with bringing an end to the war in Russia and Ukraine. And yet, when we were given authorization by the State Department to meet and actually host, for the first time in 20 years, diplomatic discussions with the Russian Duma, there were actually bots that started hitting our accounts saying that we shouldn't be engaged in peace talks, to try to influence the masses. And you could tell very quickly where they were coming from, because it was certain keywords that they were reusing over and over again, saying that, these peace talks shouldn't happen. You never want to have an elected official advocating for war. First of all, that's
Right.
what sociopaths do. And secondly, if we go to war, it's very likely that you will end up in that war. So why would we not want to at least engage in the talks with that? What I will say is that I do think that President Trump's going to be able to accomplish that peace deal, but that we did identify early on that they were using bots to try to influence the way younger people talk. And what I will tell you is that I have a lot of interaction with my voters back home, with my friends, and I don't know many people that want us to continue any war that we're in.
Right.
In
Right.
fact, most people don't want it. They want to be able to focus, have their families, make money, have access to the American dream. And I think that that's important. And so what I will say is, regardless of the noise, we don't use the noise to make our decision. At least I don't, to make my decisions. And I am focusing on doing what I can to ensure that we aren't engaged in wars around the world. And I will also say that I have, on a number of occasions, talked to President Trump specifically on Iran. I think that he is making progress. You just saw that they actually got a ceasefire negotiated for all this time. And if there's one person that I trust will not continue a conflict, it's going to be him.
Right.
I've made my opinions very much so known on that matter. And so I do think that he's, engaged in the right discussions. And I think that we are in a good spot. But what I will say is, just next time you argue on the internet, make sure it's with someone and not with a bot.
Yeah, exactly. So for the young people out here, don't get all butthurt and want to jump off a building or something because people are
Yeah,
coming
don't.
attacking you, because they're probably not even real people anyway.
Yeah.
They come at me all the time. I see certain topics where I just get bombarded with comments, and it's very hateful and weird, and so I learned to realize that either I don't care what these people think, or they're probably bots in the first place. People that have a genuine response in the comment section, meaning that they thoroughly go through talking points, that makes sense that that's a real person that disagree with you. But somebody that's just saying mean things and these regurgitated talking points, $7,000 and all this, it's like, these are probably bots. Okay, so we're running low on time. I want to get your quick take on two topics. Just maybe like a minute and a half response. Hopefully that could be sufficient, because I know that these are loaded, topics. But what is the most alarming thing that you have learned that you can disclose to the public about UAPs? Like, what is the thing that you're like, if I could pick one thing that like keeps me up at night in the way in which you could disclose it to the public, what would be that thing?
There was one piece of investigation that was released. It was an FBI document. It was in the first tranche of documents that were finally released, talking about a interaction, citing that it had occurred. And you will see on a number of news sources that spherical disc, whatever it is. And all I will say is that the FBI was and is seriously looking into all of this, and we can't explain it. So the idea that the phenomenon does not exist has been disproven. It does. And what was very interesting about that specific investigation and that document that you can find online, you can see the illustration of it, is that the people that reported it, this thing appeared in a flash of light and then disappeared. But then you see some of the footage, and that footage was classified, and we worked very hard for the release of that. And I will say that had President Trump not been in office, it still would have been classified. That there's more coming in the next, I think, week or so. There's going to be another tranche of documents, or footage. But it's one of those things that we won't tell you what to believe. You can look at it and review it for yourself. I think a lot of people realize, maybe we're not the only thing on this planet, but I don't like to speculate other than, our witnesses have told us some very interesting things. They don't use the word extraterrestrial. They use interdimensional, and then look for the stuff for yourself and make your own conclusions.
I love that. I got one more question, and this is the Epstein file thing. Because like I told you before, and maybe I'm just fatigued with it, but I know that you are a very staunch person in exposing some of this Epstein file things, the corruption and people involved. And I've been waiting for a while to just be like, I got to talk to Anna about this Epstein thing. And all my staff is like, you got to talk to Anna, Paulina, about Epstein. And I know that we can't get into it all today. Maybe we could do another interview, maybe specifically about this. But when it comes to this Epstein thing, what if you could tell the public, like just say everybody in the world was watching this right now, and you have people that think this, believe this, don't believe this, skeptical, whatever the case may be, some are conspiratorial. What would you tell people, and what is the most important thing that they need to know about the Epstein files?
I don't think that we have the full deck of cards in regards to the documents, because I believe prior to the administration, some of that stuff was destroyed. Also, too, there was a cyber attack in the New York location that they were housing some of this information that I guess was allegedly responsible for a lot of the data being deleted. And so that's why you see a gap in time period from some of the documents that we have currently. And I 100% without a doubt believe that he was a intel asset. The question is, for which country?
Wow. I do wonder that. There's no way this dude's just freaky like that. You know what I mean? Maybe P. Diddy was, but this guy has so many connections. You can't find out where he's getting paid from. All these people are on these emails, and it's just insane.
Brandon, I did the deposition with Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, and I asked them the same questions, like, do you think it's possible? In so many words, I asked him that he was a foreign asset, or that he was running a honeypot operation, and I think it was Hillary Clinton that had concurred that it was very likely a possibility.
Wow. But okay, here's the last question I have. Are people going to be held accountable to the degree that will be satisfactory to the public? Or do you think that we will forever be ran in circles because there's people that are in power, in positions that we can't even see or understand, that will ensure that nobody of any substance or nobody of any rank will be prosecuted? So do you think that people are going to actually be still mad at this thing 10 years from now, or do you think that we're going to get to a conclusion?
I think that 10 years from now, there's still going to be questions because, again, as I stated earlier, we don't have the full deck of cards, meaning that there's a lot of information that we don't have, that we're never going to get because it was destroyed prior to this administration. Also, too, in February, I came forward with a whistleblower that had alleged that there was destruction of evidence under the former deputy director of the FBI pertaining to these files, and also to there's some other stuff. I think it was tied to Russiagate. All that to say that was documented, and then it came out after the fact that it was very likely that it happened. And so what I will say is that it's also important to remember that there's active civil suit against Deutsche Bank from some of the victims that had come to testify on Capitol Hill. And the first question people asked, specifically the Democrats, was Donald Trump implicated in this? He was then exonerated by the victims, also exonerated by Bill Clinton. But then, step further, the attorney had kind of mentioned that they were getting phone calls from people, if people were named in lawsuits or they choose to settle and make people sign NDAs, then you're never going to get the names. And so at least to my knowledge, I have reached out to Oversight a number of times. Up until I think a few days ago, we only got 3 names in total that Comer has, and there are active depositions happening. But remember, the women that were named as co-conspirators in the New York trial pled down, and they actually were given then victim status to testify against Ghislaine Maxwell, and that's why she's the only one. A lot of those horrific emails that you saw talking about minors, talking about, making fun of this little girl while she was praying, those were sent by women. And so I'm not just saying it was the women doing it. Obviously, there were, men that were exposed to this. There was a very weird doctor. But again, this investigation has been made as public as possible. You have the Democrats that some have actually been rightfully fighting for this in a correct position, and it hasn't just been the partisan mud throwing that you're seeing on television. They actually care about bringing justice for this. But again, I just think that the waters have been so muddied that unless they're considering potentially, and this is what I've suggested, the DOJ, if they can, charging them with human rights violations for, some of the trafficking. But again, the nature of the immunity and plea deals that they got for testifying, it's so layered in all of this. And the fact is that it was multiple administrations that sat on this. The plea deals were given under prior AGs. The victims, we have 3 names now. Comer has them, but that's it. And ultimately, unless people come forward, with smoking gun, and then you have the other aspect of, if you have evidence destruction, then you can't prove it in the court of law. So it's one of those things that I think is going to go down in history as, one of the most, corrupt instances that occurred in American politics and in the criminal justice system, because under the former administrations, they sat on this, they did nothing with it, and that was it. But again, how are we supposed to have all of the investigative tools when we're only dealing with partial files because of the destruction that allegedly occurred, in different administrations?
Yeah, that's very interesting. We got to talk about this again another time. I know that you very busy woman down there kicking butt on Capitol Hill. So thank you, Honor Paulina Luna, for coming on. I really appreciate the friendship. I appreciate you holding it down like a quarter pound in Congress, because nobody else is really doing it the way you're doing it. There's a few, but I feel like you're the most genuine. I argue with my guys all the time. Well, not all the time. One person in particular, he over here looking at me. But we argue all the time, and he don't trust anybody in Congress except you. He's like, I don't trust that person. I don't trust the person. But he trusts you.
There's a couple, Brandon Gill, Tim Burchett. There's some really good ones. There's some really, really, no one's perfect though. We're not going to be perfect. I don't expect everyone to 100% agree with me.
Right.
But, I see how it functions. And the one thing is that I don't want to do this forever.
Yeah.
And so I don't really care about, kind of shaking things up a little bit. But for those people, what I will say is call to action. If you don't agree, what are you doing to change it? Are you helping? Are you engaging? Or are you just sitting on the internet and complaining? Big difference.
True. Love that. That's a good cap on
Thank you, BT.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. God bless you. Keep up the good work, and we'll talk soon.
We'll talk soon. Thanks. Bye.
All right.